live on the
Do you know
Fausty
I never
Witches
get?
show with Faustiest Witch of
I
them all.
never get
He's in
bored
the
of that.
garden today. You're in the garden today. This is different
my
scenery.
garden.
Well, you're in a garden.
Yeah, technically. Picnic area.
Blink twice, Chris, if they're just not letting you leave. Right. Because I am concerned, you see. I'm just worried that they're not letting you leave, but they're still letting you do your live feeds just so people don't suspect. I'm wondering if you've actually been kidnapped. So today's topic is...
Oh no, I have...
International...
I've just checked on the Facebook and I am blurry.
Yeah, I told you. You didn't believe me when I said you're blurry, but you are. So today's topic, international cooperation and stuff. So I stole that from Harry Potter, I think, because isn't that like a department or something? The Ministry of Magic.
Ministry
So
of Magic.
is there real life cooperation between witches? Because judging by what I'm seeing online, because most people think online is kind of the way that people communicate internationally and that, I have to say it's very hit and miss. I'm seeing a lot of talking. I'm not seeing a lot of cooperation now. It all seems a bit kind of nasty in many ways.
No. I think people try, don't they? Like, I think a few years ago, didn't they attempt to do some kind of pagan council?
Oh, they did that American thing,
that,
didn't they? Some American
kind of,
Witches Council.
Yeah.
I can't see why they thought that was ever a good idea, if I'm honest, but there we go.
I think the thing is because particularly, if we're going to, I'm going to hit the New Ages straight away. So if you go and hit the kind of New Age practice and the, try and get pagans all to sit in the same room, the problem is often a political correctness to the point that they have to identify everybody. I think that's why the Insta witches use those things like, I'm a green witch and I'm a sea witch and all that crap.
Okay, because if you're talking online stuff, there's two things that I see going wrong here. One is that people are drawn to, really fantasists with miserable crap lives are drawn to the idea that they like thinking of themselves as some powerful witch with superpowers and shit. And so they join little groups and dress up like witches, but don't really do any magic. They just kind of post memes and stuff. So we've got one kind of group of people that cause a trouble because they annoy people, because they don't really talk about anything magical whatsoever. They just talk about, they just post memes and selfies and pictures of their cat. Whereas the other group, you've got people that are really trying to push stuff out there, but that think they know best, and then if anyone disagrees with them, then they have to start an argument and that. And I don't know, this is what kind of gets me, is if you put yourself out there in social media, you have to expect people to dislike what you're saying, right? And the vast majority of people out there are going to disagree with what you're saying. So if you're putting stuff out there to educate people, I think you have to accept that you're not going to educate people, that people are just going to go la 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 and not listen. Because a lot of the times when I've seen, I've seen people that, they practice a lot and have a lot of experience with magic and the craft and that, and they post responses to people that are asking genuine questions or what they think of as genuine questions, and they give a genuine answer, and then people kind of attack them and say, well, I'm not happy with that answer, or they kick them out, because it's all about these Facebook groups now, isn't it? There's so many witchcraft Facebook groups and so many of those kind of things. It's all about the comment section. So they'll write tiny little one word, kind of one sentence questions, not elaborate on anything at all. Oh, I'm struggling with astral projection. Tell me about that. and they'll just put that and expect someone to answer, when I'm suspicious as to whether they actually expect an answer. So what I think is a lot of it's attention seeking. I think they don't really want to know the answer. If they wanted to know the answer, they're posting things that you could quite easily Google. And then the second thing is that they're not giving any information whatsoever. It's just kind of a throwaway statement. Because if you were struggling, what you would do is say, I've tried doing this. I've got this success. I've got this failure. Has anyone got any advice? What you wouldn't do is tell me about this, because that's kind of a throwaway statement that you're just expecting people to randomly comment, you know. And I'm thinking that a lot of the magical cooperation these days seems to be in the comment sections. And I know back in the 90s when we were around, it was forums and stuff like that. And I know that things would get quite heated.
I think some of those still exist.
Things would get quite heated in the forums and that. But I don't think it's as bad as what it is now, is it? It used to be better, because at least then with the forums, the chances are if you were in there, you were actually interested in the subject, not just joining a group to be part of something. I don't know. What's your thoughts?
I don't know. It's tricky. I think part of it is it's cool right now. So everyone wants to have some kind of witchiness going on. And it's so easy to buy the kitschy shit. Like, you know, every shop's got, you know, even places like supermarkets like Asda and stuff have got, you know, unicorns and mermaids and shit and all these kind of fancy chrome things. And you know, you can go and get kind of fake cauldrons and things now. So you just kind of like, you know, it's quite easy for someone to pick up on the fad. And then obviously you've got places like Nemesis now who throw out so much churn out so much shit in resin. But it's just kind of like, you know, there's so much of it going on there that it's so easy to kind of jump in. That maybe a lot of it is that. I don't know. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit.
Well, to be fair, there's a big difference between the devotees, so religious people within magic or practice, and then really kind of your idea of you're a occultist or you're more... Oh dear, someone's done something, because you've got a poltergeist there or something.
No, I've got a chicken.
Oh, it's a chicken. Okay. Boy, is that one that you're going to sacrifice later?
No, we're not going to sacrifice this one. It's got to get a bit bigger first.
Oh, okay. Growing the chicken sacrifice. Right, okay. I can't even remember what I was saying now. I think this is the first time we got... No, this isn't the first time we've been interrupted by a chicken, is it? It's the first time we've been physically interrupted by a chicken. I mean, we've had chickens in the comment section before, but not like physically on camera. So this is the first on camera.
It is a cool chicken.
So,
Bruce,
the idea of magical cooperation kind of implies that you're cooperating, you're attempting to do something together. Now, one thing that makes me a little iffy is that a lot of people are finding that witchcraft, quote unquote, and magic is kind of like a movement and it's getting political. And that there's more when you look online.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest problem with it.
With communities, it's more about coming together and having witchcraft as some kind of aesthetic for a movement than it is about the actual progression and pushing the progression of magical practice. So whether your individual magical practice and growing as an individual and learning more and getting more experience and seeking others that can help you with that, versus obviously going out and trying to push magical practice as a total, you know, inventing new ways of doing stuff and upping the general level of magical practice in the world by having more powerful and knowledgeable magical practitioners at the end of the day. I'm finding back in the day it was a little bit more, well, people came together to try and really push their understanding and push magic in general. Now it seems to be a little bit too much like magic has nothing to do with witchcraft and magic in general. And
But then we've said this a million times though. One of the worst things to happen to witchcraft was the repeal of the Witchcraft Act. You know, when it allowed it to be so public. So now it's a case of, you know, it's too public now, to the point where it's not really sharing in the same way it should be. So, you know, back in the day, you'd go into a public library and find a letter left there by another witch, doesn't know you. But if you managed to find it, you know, you'd meet up and you'd be able to talk about your craft and compare, you know, one secret practice with another secret practice. So whereas now it's a case of you just Google it and find an entire community, and I use that really loosely because there's nothing community about it. It's mostly people slagging off each other's practice and saying obviously this one's better than that one, or you can't practice that because of this, and you know, I can't, you know, you can't use sage because of this reason, and you misappropriation this and misappropriation that. So, you know, like you said, it's got far too political. And actually, I find that, like alphabet soup, it's one of those things that kind of separates people more than it brings them together, even though the idea is supposed to be community. So, but you know, I think more people, hopefully, a few more people like us are out there doing some things, I hope, and just kind of sharing knowledge without actually making it I don't know, monetized in the same way. Obviously we monetize to a certain extent, but you know, we're not selling £2,000 courses to become a priestess, are we? So, you know, it's a very different process. So
yeah, I do worry about some of these. Well, they're scams essentially, aren't they? A lot of them that are out there. They're taking advantage. Well, that's an interesting one, actually. If you're talking about the scams, so people seeking out other people and being charged ridiculous amounts of money for a piece of paper that you're guaranteed to get whether you do the work or not, then who falls for that? Because it's not the actual witches, is it? It's not people with experience. It's the people that are really just starting out. And you kind of think, I'm not sure at this stage, is it a rite of passage for people that are just getting starting out? Is it a rite of passage for them to get screwed over so that they see the fake and have been burnt by the fake and then are more careful with, you know, where they go in the future? Are you being attacked by chickens again?
No, I mean shit on by chickens.
Oh, okay. And they're laughing at you now.
No, the chicken is.
I'm sure there are people watching that are laughing at you as well.
It's fine. Well, normally you have cats attacking me, so
I don't think the cats attack you as much, though, do they? I think certainly the chickens have definitely gone through you. I don't think you normally get shat on by a cat, do you? They normally just like to show their asses in the camera.
But then my cats know me, whereas Bruce has only just met me. So, you know, and bearing in mind, 10 minutes ago, before we started this, we were eating chicken. So, you know, it kind of does make sense that he probably went, oh, my ex-cousin
hashtag KFC
is, covered in batter. So, I was eating Chinese chicken. So it might have been chicken.
Well, that's probably not chicken. That's probably cat, isn't it?
It's probably cat.
It depends if you go into that dodgy Chinese place. Anyway, going back onto the topic, Chris, magical cooperation. Now, we talked a little about, like, in the, I think Karen put it in the description, the idea of, you know, Doctors Without Borders. You're a qualified doctor. There are people in the world that are suffering. Let's band together and kind of go and help them, because doctors generally help people. Most of them, anyway. Some of them go into things because they have a fascination with science and go into research. But a lot of your stereotypical kind of medical doctors often gravitate towards it to kind of because they're nice people and that. Herbalists Without Borders is similar. So you've got kind of herbalism, herbalists, qualified people coming together to try and also help with medical problems and that. Is there any witches doing this? Is there a Witches Without Borders?
I don't think there is. But then I think that would be tricky to do based on the fact that so many cultural practices are different from country to country. So, you know, if you went out to middle of West Africa, yes, I'm sure we would be useful, but there might be a language barrier. Whereas, you know, I guess in some ways we kind of do it with the mentoring program that we do. Bear in mind, we've got people from almost every corner of everywhere now. I think we had someone from Russia start this week. So you just kind of like we've done the US and Canada and South America, and now we're doing kind of Central Europe and kind of West Europe. So we'll see what happens. So it's what it is.
So a lot of it really with witchcraft is more about the teaching. So you see a lot of kind of online witchy schools and mystery schools and stuff like that start up, and it's more about teaching people to, you know, do things for themselves, I suppose. Whereas, you know, cunning folk practices, professional witchcraft, that sort of thing was all about, you know, doing work in exchange for, or providing a service in exchange for money or eating chickens or eggs or something like that. But you don't necessarily see that being done on a large scale. You see it on an individual basis because, of course, there are still professional witches in the world, you know, even in the Western world. But you don't see them all banding together, do you? Because there's always been this kind of thing. If you're going back to like the original old-fashioned witchcraft, obviously it was only bad things. You know, it was a word used to, you know, that's the bad magical practitioner. And then when people just started labeling everyone as a witch for political reasons and the like, then you've got people that are really doing things to try and help people. They're still getting classed as witches because the people in power don't like them. But there is that service there, whether it's a free service or whether it's a paid for service, it's still a service. You're still kind of providing something for the community. And we've never really had large groups of witches doing that, have we? It's only really been the local wise woman, cunning man, that, or, you know, you might travel a great distance, maybe even to go and see an individual. The closest really that you see to that in the ancient kind of times especially is the priesthoods and the like. So structure.
Yeah, temple complexes.
Herbalists Without Borders has structure. And the witches agree, the herbalists agree to work in a certain way. Doctors Without Borders has structure, and the doctors agree to work in a certain way. Witches Without Borders, if that was to happen, would need some sort of structure and some sort of ethics and way of practicing.
Of ethics,
yeah, and possibly insurance and stuff like that. But that's where it might fall down because everyone likes to work in their own way, don't they? And if you go to medical school, you generally train to a specific standard and to meet specific standards. Those standards might vary from country to country, but they're still generally a kind of standard. Herbalism, you've got the same thing. Clinical herbalists train to a standard. Witches don't, though, because there are no great witchcraft schools. There are witchcraft schools. I'm saying there's no great ones.
There are no great ones, but there's also a case of what we all have different ideas of what a foundation of witchcraft would be.
Yeah.
So, you know, what our set bar would be, you know, something
PhD level
crossing the abyss. Yeah. Whereas when you think of what most people it's do you own a lighter and candles in all colours and, you know, various different quartz crystals. Like, you know, how is that really a foundation? And you wouldn't be able to do. Also, it comes down to what we normally say about first aid. You know, most people are first aiders; they're not doctor equivalent. So, how would you make that a standard when it's talking about it?
A lot of professional magical practitioners that practice folk magic are first aiders. You know, they can only do one or two things,
Yeah.
and they can't do them to a high standard. They've just learnt that, or that knowledge has been passed on to them, or that abilities maybe has been passed on to them. So there's not really in-depth training a lot of the time. And the standard, I think, is the problem. If you did have a Witches Without Borders, what would their purpose be, do you think? Would it literally be it will tell you if your husband's cheating on you, psychic surgery type thing? Would it be kind of, instead of calling the Samaritans when you've got a problem and you're depressed, you call up the conglomerate of witches or something? Would it all be psychic work? Or what? Would it be spell work, trying to make the world some sort of utopian society? Oh
No,
gosh, can you imagine that?
No. Last 5 minutes. Just think of the ones that have happened before now. They don't work. I would imagine what the best possible way would be educational based. So it would be this is sharing that culture's methods with another in order to improve it, you know, so they can finally get past a gripper, like, you know, and actually share some kind of real practice beyond, you know, beyond the basics of what a gripper did in kind of four centuries ago. So, and kind of pointing out what is actually achievable, and how these systems work integratively. Like, you know, if you had people with a particular level of understanding coming together across the board, you wouldn't need to really bother with the language problem, I would imagine, because you'd share on an astral basis. In which case, it would be Star Trekky, wouldn't it? And they're intergalactic translators, whatever you call them.
Well, going back to kind of what we were discussing on the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast when we just did the episode on magical grids and that, what I was saying about obviously likening witches more to computer hackers than to scientists, in that they're all in tinkering around. Sometimes they do good things, sometimes they do bad things, but they're pushing their knowledge and they're taking on little tasks. Whenever you see computer hackers working together, they're working together on a project that has a result. They're trying to do something. So whether they're trying to build some kind of program, whether they're trying to gain access to something, it's kind of quest based, isn't it? When the people join together, particularly when it comes to communities like Linux and that, where they've got open source. So they're working not for a profit, but they're coming together to build something, create software, do this, do that. Then that could translate to magic, because you do see that if people are interested in a very specific area of magic, then there will be communities that kind of build around research towards that. A lot of the online communities that I've seen have been, you know, they have a theme. Some of them are kind of traditional witchcraft theme. A lot of them don't contain any traditional witchcraft, but they call themselves a traditional witchcraft theme. Some go into more psychic work. Some go into this, that, and the other. So kind of is that specific project or a specific interest, a specific area of magic. I can see people coming together and sharing ideas and resources to go, you know, based around that. But very often it's the kind of the structure that people don't like. They don't want to change the way they like to do things in order to work with someone else. And unless you create a universal structure, way of doing stuff like you get with the organizations we talked about, Herbalists Without Borders and those kind of things, and charity-based things, then you're not really going to have it. And when you're talking about mixing of cultures, like you said, they've all got different ways of doing things. So unless they're going to come together and make a kind of unique thing, which would probably look a lot like hoodoo, wouldn't it? The blending together of lots of cultures for practical reasons, for practical magic. That's kind of hoodoo-y. And you do see a lot of the sort of people that are interested in that nowadays gravitate towards that. I know so many people that are, you know, if they do professional magic or service magicians and the like, they do tend to gravitate towards that style of practice because it is practical, isn't it? And it's service orientated.
I think it always comes back to what we've said a million times before, which is that in this day and age, we don't have that kind of societal need for it. So it's almost like it's superficial to too many people. So then it's hard to then have any kind of coherent mixture for substance.
Well, I don't,
because it's not going to be pushing.
I don't know, because
they all have their own way of doing things.
I mean, you say there's no need, but we know that's not true, because if we sit at a psychic fair or we sit somewhere with a witch label, you get person after person after person, mundane or magical practitioner, doesn't really matter, coming to you for advice, coming to you to try and get you to help them, use magic to help them. There's definitely a market out there, but obviously because we don't accept nowadays magic to exist, luckily, magic doesn't exist, of course, legally speaking, then it's out there, but it's not out there.
Entertainment purposes.
Yeah, and I'm thinking if magic was accepted legally and universally to be a legitimate thing, then that would mean that these sorts of places, which you'd probably get more likely, it wouldn't be Herbalists Without Borders, it would be the National Association of Herbalists, that sort of thing. You'd get associations, because you'd get all these witches all of a sudden that are legally kind of identified as a profession that needs to be overseen. Essentially, so there would be government oversight and there would be some sort of
that's the thing.
Professional standard put in place.
As soon as it's real, then it needs to be legislated for.
Yeah, I think we'd
all have to carry licenses.
Well, we've joked before, if that was to ever happen, the only way we'd get on there is if we created the association. And if magic does become a legally recognized thing, the first thing we'd have to do is create an association and be the kind of stamp of approval. Because the sort of naughty things we get up to, I can't imagine anybody letting us join unless there's like a black hat hackers association, but for witches. Maybe we could join that, but yeah.
I wouldn't, to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if there was. Like, it's definitely something that's in the realms of possibility, but we'll see. But it just is what it is. And I didn't mean like there is no need for it. I mean that's how it's perceived now. So that obviously, whereas before, like we've often said before, it was life or death. Like, my crops are failing, what do I do? My prize chickens have died. What am I going to do in order to get through the next season? Like, how am I going to get through the winter till the new year? So it was survival based. Whereas with that aspect missing, now it's kind of becomes trivial, doesn't it? Because people are kind of like, oh, okay, well, now I go and, I want to know if my husband's cheating, rather than actually asking real questions about political change, which is crazy because they try and shoehorn as much politics into witchcraft as they possibly can these days.
But these are the people that do nothing.
They might have actually talked about it.
Of course. Like I said, like earlier when we were talking about the politics within magic, you've got all of these witches cursing Donald Trump and all that. It doesn't make a fucking difference, but that's because the people that have no ability and limited ability are the people that are going and doing that work. The sort of people that are jumping on those bandwagons, the politics bandwagon, seem to be the beginners. They're not kind of the advanced practitioners. And I think you do kind of have to ask yourself, why is that? Why is it that the more advanced witches and magical practitioners ain't really getting involved with that? Is it because they got better things to do, perhaps? Or is it that they know more than you do? Who knows? Alex has put a statement in. I don't know if it's a statement or a question, but I'm presuming it's a statement.
A question. That looks like a statement.
Materialism and consumerism destroyed magic and spirituality. I think this all goes back the Enlightenment era. Okay, that's interesting. So the one thing I'd say about that, which I don't think people really think about, is that you don't have to go too far back to see that communities pull together, and actually very often small communities would support each other by all fitting into that community and fulfilling a job. So, living in a more rural area and living also kind of on the edge of a city, in a city, you do see the difference between in the rural village and that there are still people. It is a village. It's still, oh, well, you run out your sugar, you literally go down the road to the person you know. Oh, your car's broken down. Oh, it's been snowing and my car's rolling down the hill, or I've skidded into something. I know, I'll phone John up down there, got a Land Rover, and he can get me out of this divot or this ditch that I'm in now, kind of thing. That still goes on. In tribal society, obviously, everyone there wasn't really much of a need for money because everyone in the community fulfilled a role and you'd all help each other out. When you kind of see money and that coming, you see trade. And at the end of the day, if magic exists, then there's going to be people that are going to charge for it because it's going to be something people want. It's when people charge money for things that don't work, I think that would be the danger. So with the materialism and the consumerism, I don't think you need to look much further than those Tibetan singing bowls or crystals, because
that's an example.
you've got the idea of let's invent something and market it for the sole purpose of making money. So with the kind of singing bowls thing, is kind of pretending to be some sort of ancient thing, some spiritual thing, and then it's not really. It was literally designed to be a product to buy straight away. A lot of things, if you're a witch and you develop psychability and then you do tarot readings or whatever, and then you set up shop and provide a service in exchange for money, you started off with the magic. If you're really good at making talismans, like the old Egyptian temples selling talismans and stuff like that, and mummified cats and shit, if you do that and it works magically, you make the magical thing first, and then you get a reputation for that, so people want it and are willing to pay for it because there's history and people say that it works. With the consumerism, and I see in magic, a lot of it is fakery. So some of the most ridiculous stuff that I do tend to see is literally like when we went to Glastonbury, we went in that soul therapy center and they're selling magical crystal stuff, but they're not real crystals. And they're saying they've designed crystals in a lab to be sold. They're not some kind of magical device or anything like that. It's literally marketing image. When you go to a gift shop or witchcraft shop, because essentially most of the time they're the same things nowadays, and you see at the till fairies for sale or fairy bottles and that was designed somewhere in China. There may be some history of jar spells or some kind of thing there, but they are now turning that into a product that has no magical ability. And the people, this is the important thing, the people that make it, the people that designed it, and very often the people that sell it, have no interest in magic whatsoever. What they're doing is jumping on a bandwagon. So if you've got a magical practitioner that's creating magic and then bottling that up and selling it, there's a difference between that, and I think a difference between what I think, Alex, you're talking about with the materialism and consumerism. I mean, we could also talk about the collectors, because when we talked about the fantasist types, which they're not really interested in magic, they just want to belong and think of themselves as a powerful magical witch or something. They just buy loads of books and loads of crystals and loads of things, and they sit on a shelf and look pretty. They never get taken off of the shelf. They just sit there and look pretty. It's an aesthetic. So, oh yeah, snake oil salesman, Liam. I hope he's not calling me a snake oil salesman.
No,
I
it's
don't
talking
think we've
about
got
what
any
you're talking
snake
about.
oil, have we? We were going to sell snake
No.
skin. I don't think we've got any snake oil, but we so should sell snake oil. But real life snake oil, not homeopathic shit.
Put some Evapis in it or something.
Yeah. But yeah, that.
Or some of him left over, or a bit of Medusa.
So I don't know, where do you want to go with this? Obviously, anyone that has any questions, please type in the comments and we'll do our best to answer your questions. Because this is supposed to be a Q&A, these Fausty Witches kind of things. But if not, obviously we kind of roughly, I suppose, got to speak to and remain on the subject of international cooperation. So most of the time, most of the magical knowledge I see out there that's been put since the past 100 years has been books. So the publishing of books is a lot of the time how knowledge can be spread very, very, very far away. Obviously, translations and things like that, that's still just kind of getting there, I think, because there's so many occult books that aren't available in English that have been written in German. And then there's so many ancient tomes that have only now just started to be translated and maybe translated better than the ones that were already came before. I know a lot of them have never been translated, but they're
there's still a problem with like anything though, where they're being translated, yes, but they're being translated by archaeologists and linguists. They're not being translated by witches in those languages. So, you know, there is always going to be that worry of nuance is missed based on the fact that one, you know, this person hasn't got the first clue about it, and their point of reference is another archaeologist's work. In which case, that's where you kind of get, you know, problems with how people think of deities from different traditions and things like that, because they're still built on a system of archaeology which is down to a Victorian slant. You know, there is still that Victorian slant all the way through, which means it is very Christian-led. It's Abrahamic.
Yeah.
And therefore it's problematic. So, you know, you have to kind of, you know, do what you can with what they've got. Luckily, most of us witches use symbolism, and actually the symbols are probably the quickest way to get through that, and actually try to actually work with the ethos and the I know it ruins it every time I say it, but the intent behind it, you know, what was it designed for, and that sort of stuff can be, if you're adept enough, can be kind of back translated from the imagery being used, you know, with some kind of psychic detective work alongside. You know, you're going to be able to find parts of that. There are kind of, to a certain extent, you know, universal laws, but they only exist within certain types of craft. So, you know, it is still going to be trial and error. But I think the problem is, I think in the West particularly, we're used to books giving us the answer. Like there is this idea of a book giving you the answer. So when someone comes across a grimoire of some description, they expect it to give you the answer, which is not what grimoires were written in to do. They were notebooks at best. You know, ways of writing things down so you didn't forget how to do it. Not so they're not complete enough for you to actually follow them as a cookbook. They are kind of notes that only make sense to the person writing them. So then they go and read someone's grimoire and they kind of go, oh, okay, I understand what's going on. You know, like you won't if you all you've done is read the text, because there isn't enough in the text for you to actually be able to do that. And that's why you've got so many books by the likes of Scott Cunningham. Yes, I'm going to complain about him today. He's got in my craw now. So thanks to that person on YouTube. So moving forward, I'm going to find some way to shoehorn slagging off Scott Cunningham in every book, everything that we do now. Just warning you, Liam. That was my. But you know, these were, like Michelle's just said, they're personal notes. These were your ways. They're written in your own personal code that only made sense to you, and I don't mean that in a kind of cryptographer kind of way. They're written in shorthand in a way that only you would understand, or someone else initiated in your practice that would be able to do it. Like, you know, if you were to go and study, I'm trying to think. I watched somebody first thing this morning. It's probably what put me in this mood for slagging off Scott Cunningham, to be honest. But someone on YouTube this morning was going. I was watching a live they did last week, like a Q&A session about ancient Egyptian magics, and they were talking about pyramid text, and I was kind of like, okay, well, you've first and foremost really don't understand what that's designed for, but they were taking it from an art history point of view as a witch, and you just kind of like, okay, you can't mix the two like that. Like, you either come at it as a witch or like you come at it as an art historian. You can't come at it as an art historian in front of a group of witches. Like, that's not how it works. So, you know, if you are coming at it in front of a group of witches, I expect you to understand the esoteric knowledge that's behind it, not that you can understand what the pictures look like they say. You know, and she said something about to a certain up until a certain point, only the pharaoh could go to the afterlife, and you're kind of like, and what pyramid text tells you that? One, you seem to be failing to understand what actually the vehicle is actually trying to do in mummification. So you completely misunderstood that. But anyway, side rant. But it's just kind of like, unfortunately, you've got too many communities like that, like the Insta witches, etc., that they grab onto a piece of information, take it as gospel because it said it in a book. And, you know, there is this underlying trust of a book. Because it printed, it must be, you know, whereas, you know, as well as I do now, all you have to do is go get an Amazon account and you can print any book you like. You know, publishing is so easy now. If you were talking about getting something published during, you know, when the first print press was coming out, like the St. James Bible, etc. So, you know, you're talking about something that could be afforded to actually be printed, and had to be popular enough and enough people want it for it to exist. Whereas now you could, you know, the ramblings of someone on the back of a fag packet can be published by Amazon now and sold via Kindle, you know, or printed. But yeah, so I think there's a big part there that is about how easy it is to publish now. That means that you have to check your sources a lot better than you would have done 100 years ago. You know, at least when you look at a Victorian text, you can see the problems with it, but you know the problems are of the time, not because someone's trying to make a quick buck. They are, you know, it's problematic, and you just negotiate the problematic parts. Anyway, we seem to have a load of
on the book subject. Julie says a topic starter, because we've discussed this before, because I think I did a video on the Thoth TV YouTube channel for this. It's the exchange of magical knowledge. Why are there so few books written about more advanced magic? That's super simple. In order to read and understand a book on advanced magic, you need to have a foundation. And 99% of magical practitioners, I'm not talking about mundanes here that've got no interest in magic, I mean actual people that practice magic, 99% of them haven't even got a foundation level of understanding. So if you're talking about going to advanced stuff, not intermediate, advanced stuff, they're not even going to begin to understand that book in front of them is even a book. So it would literally be...
You may as well put pyramid text in front of them, because they're going to get that much closer.
You may as well put the Egyptian Book of the Dead or something in front of them, and then what they'll do is comb through it and say, because they might have this is the thing that I like to use, Chris, the term I like to use, they've learned modern ancient Egyptian.
Yeah,
because it's a modern take on the original. Things like Agrippa and Picatrix, they're not advanced books on magic, by any means.
No, they're foundational books.
They're
They're
foundational.
not even foundational.
Yeah,
They're closer to a
foundational
foundation than
books.
some of these books they're out now, but they are foundational.
Yeah. So obviously you'd have to decide if you're going to release a book on advanced magic, you'd need to think about the audience. Why are you putting that out there? If you're trying to pass the knowledge on, then you're not going to do that for a book because it's too inefficient. You know, there are much more efficient ways of doing that. So in order to do it and put that out there, you'd need to have an audience sufficiently with enough advanced magical practitioners that want to get the knowledge through book, because advanced practitioners don't get their knowledge as, they don't get knowledge from books. So the reason why there aren't any is because trying to write a book on advanced magic, you're not going to find many people that are going to buy it. Or publish it. The second is that why would you choose a less efficient method? Because bearing in mind, in order to master advanced stuff, you would have to have mastered all of the other basic things like astral projection. If you've got astral projection, then just make a time capsule on the astral world that directly downloads the knowledge into their head. It's more efficient than a book, you know?
Far more efficient.
So Alex has got a question. Since magic is often used to gain a leg up on the competition in many cultures, so survival, how do you expect people to start working together? People have been using it for centuries the way people have been using swords and shields. People need to really trust each other for that. Not necessarily. So the points I would make, there's 2 points I think I'd make personally. I don't know what Chris thinks. He might agree, might disagree, so we'll find out. You're talking about for survivalism, your tribe versus another tribe. Now, people's tribes nowadays are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So much like you might have a village doctor surgery that caters to one doctor for the village, when you live in a city, you need lots of doctors to cope with that city, multiple doctor surgeries. So if you're talking about magical practitioners coming together, and bearing in mind, we know that we are all individuals, so we all have different interests and different, people would say natural abilities, but that doesn't matter because you can make up for what you lack, You're talking about having specialists at that point, If you mirror it with the medical profession and think of doctors as witches, in a hospital, doctors have different specialisms. So if you're talking about working together, a hospital staff works together to service the medical needs of a place, an area. If you're talking witches coming together, you might be talking different witches with different abilities and interests, different rabbit holes, a rabbit kind of warren of different rabbit holes that all interlink, that you're coming together to form a group of people that can basically take on more workload, is what you're talking about, more efficiently. So basically just using logic for that one. I'm trying to. Of course, it does mean that these witches have to work together. And that's the idea of the secret society. The idea that really what you're talking about is the secret society. The difference is that generally secret societies, they don't work for the public. So they're not like the ancient mystery schools that would have nowadays we'd call it a gift shop, but essentially the old temple complexes which were doing the magical work, and then they sell mummified cats as a good luck charm type thing. We don't really have that anymore. What we have is organizations that open up a gift shop. The church has a cafe in it. The cathedral in the city I live near has a cafe in it. The cafe's for the mundanes. The church bit's for the magical practitioners. Well, I'm not supposed to call them that because they don't like that. The Christians. What's your thoughts on that? I'll put the question back up, but what's your thoughts on witches not coming together because they're kind of in competition, I suppose? Maybe. You there?
I don't think it's as simple as that. I think it tends to be. Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me or not. It's playing up something chronic.
No, I can
But
hear.
essentially, you're talking about it not being able. You're talking about it not having cohesion, and that's what it tends to come down to. That one person is more right than another, and that's what it comes down to. So you see it in these kind of moots where you just kind of see what should be a group of people that want to all share information and compare notes, but they don't want
Yeah.
that. What they want to do is show off theirs is better than someone else's, or you've got the wrong information, you need to check out this book. Because a lot of it is down to the fact they're not practicing enough for it to be in a situation where they could actually share actual knowledge. At the best, a lot of these are book groups where they share the topic of the latest book they've just read, and then they want to lend it out to each other or convince each other to buy a copy of it so that they can talk about it the next week. And a big part of it is that. And then I think I've.
Yeah. So another question for Michelle asks, because this is a really interesting one actually. With regards to finding community on your own level, I'm presuming she means on your own level, not us particularly. How do witches like the two of you find each other? I'd love to know how you connected. This is quite interesting. So again, it depends on ability, doesn't it? When doctors will meet other doctors at medical school when they train. Okay, so if you're training with other people, you'll meet them. If you go and utilize a sacred site because of the innate energies that are there, that attracts witches and magical practitioners, you'll bump into other magical practitioners. That's one. Bumping into people on the job or any formal training and stuff. The second is reputation. So there's reputation is basically hearing about them before you interact with them. Now, generally speaking, here's a big difference that people don't quite think of. People in the mundane world, they hear of reputation as fame. Oh, that wise woman, she's really famous. Oh, that cunning man, he's really famous. Oh, that's a famous author, a famous witch, blah, 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 blah. In the magical world at a slightly more advanced level, beyond the knowledge of mundanes, you notice the work they're doing. If you've got advanced witches that are literally capable of reshaping reality, when someone reshapes reality, you notice that. So you pay attention. Okay?
Yeah.
So it's really like that. So not just will you be aware because you'll have noticed that something's going on, magics are working in the area, and it ain't just mundane shit like some people praying down at the local church. There's some serious magic going on, and you, like a spidey sense, hone in on it. You might investigate it. Other things, if you deal with spirits and the like, they're also going to be aware of other magical practitioners around. So is there fireworks going off a couple of streets over? Or is some other spirit or something telling you about it? Because us witches like to gossip. We just have a tendency to gossip more on the astral world these days than in the physical world. Partly for security issues, but mainly it's an efficiency thing, I think, Chris, isn't it?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
That's the
It's a lot easier to do
yeah.
it differently.
If you're interested, right? So if you translated this to something else, and we classed witches as athletes, yeah. Athletes bump into each other at the gym because they both go there to train. It makes sense. They're both on a similar path. They both go to the same places. They both kind of do the same things. You're going to bump into like-minded individuals. So that makes sense. Within witchcraft and magic, the problem is they think, witch fest, the local pagan moot, the local occult conference. That's where the witches go. But very often the beginners go there. The beginners go there, and you might bump into advanced practitioners. You might not. If you do, then you're probably not going to notice, and they like to keep to themselves. But you're bumping into that. Really, what you're talking about is you're going and doing your work. Okay, if something weird's going on at the local forest and it attracts your attention and you go and investigate because you're sensitive enough to pick up on that, the chances are any other witches in the area are probably going to pick up on that and think, I'm going to go there and investigate too. And then you bump into them. So you bump into far more magical practitioners on a higher level, going out and about, going to magical places that they're going to use to their advantage than you will go into places that are supposedly set up for magical practitioners.
Yeah. I think we should probably add there that Stonehenge doesn't count. We don't
Stonehenge
mean
doesn't
that.
count.
We mean the creepy woods that nobody is willing to go to, or, you know, a secret waterfall that nobody knows about. These are places that are of power without actually having a temple built on them or an arrangement of stonework on top of them. So you're not going to go and find witches down at Stonehenge. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
well, they do the solstices, but remember, a lot of that tends to be more religious. And you will find that there are religions that are associated with magical practice, like paganism, stuff like that. But you'll find that there is a separation there. You know, there's a difference between the doctor and the doctor that does wacky experiments pushing the advancements of medical science. So if you've got a magical practitioner that fulfills the role of a priest or a priestess that does that, then they're not necessarily an advanced practitioner. Generally speaking, if you're talking an advanced practitioner, and that's the people that you're wanting to, you know, find, then they're going to be the ones that are pushing magic beyond where it's ever been before. They're kind of the crazy inventor types. Okay, so finding people on your own level is easy because you'll be naturally attracted to the things on your level. If you're looking at witchcraft and magic for the first time and an advert comes up looking for witchcraft and magic for the first time, or the Llewellyn Publishing Company is doing a convention, then you'll find all of the people that are at that level that are attracted to that will go to that. Maybe not all of them, but a large majority of those people will go there. You know, so if you want to look at someone that's on a different level to you, it's understanding them and what they do, and then it's just really bumping into them. Or you can just use your fetch to go and round a couple of them up and ask for formal invitations. I mean, back in the day, that's what was really done, you know, at least in witchcraft, maybe not in other forms of magical practice. See, there you go. Astral gossiping. Isn't that like insider trading, lack of trust and competition? Insider trading.
No, because once you're at a certain level, once you get to a certain level, there is no competition. It's not about competition, because what you're doing is completely different to someone that's working 2 fields over. So it's not about competition. You know, competition is little league. It is, you know, the very basic betting shop corner betting on football. Who gives a shit? Like, it is a case of, you know, when you're talking about intermediate and advanced practitioners, the only competition they're after is the one that's looking at them in the mirror. It's how can I push myself to the next part? You know, again, I hate that we have to do that, but going back to the athlete's comment before, you know, that athlete in the swimming pool day after day after day is trying to beat their own time. You know, if it just happens to beat everybody else, that's great. The competition's only there really to prove who's best in order to win deals. The actual, you know what I mean? Like, that's why they want to win these awards all the time, because that gets the funding in so they can keep doing what they're doing, which is trying to beat their best time. You know, and that's how athletes work at a professional level.
That's how athletes progress.
You're not having Yeah.
But
So
the gatekeeping, you have to skip the gatekeeping, and I don't know whether you're gatekeeping by skipping the gatekeeping, because the athletes compete at the Olympics, but you have to be an Olympic standard athlete to go to the Olympics and compete. So yeah, backstage, I suppose you'd say it, or in the Olympic village, you'd meet other athletes who are at the top of their game, but you're not going to get in that village unless you're one of those athletes. So in terms of the separations, I mean, we do it, don't we, Chris? We've got the different tiered system of advanced, intermediate, and beginner, but that there's reasons for that. You know, is not to keep. Some people use it to keep people down. Other people use it as a safety measure.
Yeah.
You know, if you're wanting to discuss high level mathematics, you're not going to do that in the kindergarten or in reception class. You know, you've got to do that with people that are near or at that level, you know. So Michelle says about obviously applying to someone above your level you want to learn from. So what do you want to learn? You've got to ask yourself that. If you're asking yourself what you want to learn, can you teach yourself? Where's your sticking points? Why aren't you progressing? All these questions you kind of need to ask yourself, and that'll help you crack through it. I think the secret to meeting people that, well, generally speaking, I mean, going back to kind of classic and mythology, Chris, advanced magical practitioner, some crazy ass creepy witch on an island in the middle of nowhere that don't want to be bothered. You have to go pretty far outside of your way to go there and get an audience with her. That shows a sacrifice. That shows that you're serious. But at the same time, there's always the prospect that you go there, you go on that dangerous quest to get to that island, and the witch says, "Get off my fucking island." So, you know, it is one of those things. I think if you want the most basic explanation of how you might attract the attention of that person, you don't attract the attention by showing an interest in them. You don't try and spy on them or anything like that. What you do is you get on their radar. If you've got someone that is a award-winning quantum physicist, you can bet your bottom dollar that they're aware of all of the other, you know, quantum physicists that have a reputation in the world. So what you need to do is start working towards that. The closer you get to that, the more they're likely to start seeing your name crop up, your reputation crop up. If you're a scientist that wants to work their way up to being a famous scientist, a Nobel Prize winner, then you working towards that means getting your name on papers. People need to be aware of the reputation. People need to be aware of your work. You saying, "I've got a real interest in quantum physics," probably isn't going to mean that you're going to work with that quantum physicist. If that person's nice and you use a bit of manipulation, you could say, "I'll buy you a pint at the pub. Talk me through this." And that's what paying for things looks like. Sorry, what were you going to say?
At the end of the day, Einstein, I was going to say Einstein is not going to allow someone that knows nothing about science to come and sit in and watch his experiments. Like, why would he? Like, you know, that's kind of what you've got to think about is, at the end of the day, practicing, actually doing shit is what's going to attract attention. It goes back to what I struggle with a lot of practitioners who use petition-based work, who have selected the person they want to work with. You know, there is no part of the kind of going, okay, well, does this entity want to work with you? Probably not. You know, you start practicing, you will attract the attention of entities that want to work with you. You don't
Like the
need to go
popular kid at
petitioning it,
school.
you know? Yeah, exactly. You know, you build yourself a reputation. And it's not, you know, this is witchcraft. We're not talking about other witches need to know about you. We're talking about the fact that obviously you need to be performing at a level that attracts attention. You know, who gives a shit what other humans think? Let's face it, most of the time. You know, it's rare to find decent witches these days.
When you're trying to suppress the level of information and the work that you do and stop other people from seeing it, that's when you'll start reaching a foundation. You'll start reaching a foundation because you'll attract too much fucking attention. So you want to try and avert the attention because it'd be too much. Einstein, going back to that you said.
Then you're trying to dim your light.
Yeah, going back to Einstein. Einstein may choose to teach, but he teaches on his terms. He goes and chooses what lectures that he wants to do. He goes and chooses what lectures he doesn't want to do. Not everyone wants to teach. Not everyone wants to lecture. Someone that's at the top of their game might not want to do that, but at the same time, they might decide, I'm going to go out of my way to try and do a little bit to push things further. So our last question, because I think we've gone over time.
We're well over time.
Well over time. So you have to break the metaphorical Gordian knot to get them to notice you.
Essentially, yes. It is it's not a case of a great feat. It's actually exactly that. Intelligence is what gets you past the Gordian knot. It's not brute strength. We're not saying you need to cast the biggest spells. What we're saying about is that you need to have an understanding that raises your energy up to a point that it's noticeable. And then, like you say, like Liam said,
yeah,
I start having to hide that because you would start to attract too much attention.
The one thing I'd worry about the approach or the thought process behind this is, why are you trying to get the attention of an advanced practitioner? That's what I'd worry about. If you're trying to get the attention for them to teach you the answers, what happens when you're an advanced practitioner and there's no one above you now? Where are you getting your answers? The process is literally not we try and help people cheat as much as possible. That's what the Thoth mentoring program is for. Our Thoth Witchcraft Patreon mentorship program is designed to help people cheat as efficiently as possible. But that doesn't mean that you can kind of actually cheat. It doesn't mean that you can just be given the answers and automatically get there. You need to do the work. We just help you do the work more efficiently. It's like one of those adult learning courses that only take a couple of months to get the qualification compared to like an entire secondary school education. It basically works like that. We just teach you the stuff you need to know to get to that, that step. So if you're asking or you're trying to get the attention of an advanced practitioner, you need to ask yourself why that is. If the answer is to cheat and get them to mentor you and give you the answers, then that's not going to work. Because think about it this way. We talked about the athletes. If you get trained by an athlete, yes, they're at the top of their game. But you still need to do all the physical stuff to get in shape to be an athlete yourself. It just means that you're going for someone that really knows their stuff, So it does make things more efficient, I suppose. But don't think, like a lot of people do, that it's somehow going to help you cut all of the corners, because that's a problem that I'm seeing a lot. That's why people cling to the next book and the next book and the next book, because they're like, oh, I want the answers. I know all about the Kabbalistic tree of life because I've read all about it. It's like, no, you have no fucking clue whatsoever. But there we go. I think that's it for this week. Is there anything else, Chris?
No, at the end of the day, it comes down to putting the work in. If you're not going to put in the work in, you're not going to get anywhere. Even if you did go and find the perfect mentor that gave you the answer without any work, you wouldn't be able to perform it.
Because it's a craft.
So, what's the point? It's a craft. You can't skip sections. You have to have lived them.
Yeah.
So, yes, there is cheating by, picking up the lifetimes when you did learn them the first time. But that's the closest you can get to cheating, is not having to relearn it and just download from the time you do remember it. But that's different. But yeah. we need to go.
So that's it for this week's Fausty Witches. Fausty Witches is brought to you by the Keep On Chatting Network, which is a paranormal network TV show online. You can tune into lots of shows. Fausty Witches show is, of course, the best show on the network, but there are other shows that are almost as good. So to check them out, go on the Keep On Chatting Facebook page.
Nice.
Or the Keep On Chatting YouTube channel. Goodbye for now.